I walked into that boardroom thinking I had the future on my arm. She was the perfect weapon, sharp and hungry. But when the double doors opened, the air left my lungs. The person sitting at the head of the table wasn't some mysterious investor. It was the woman I despised most in this world. And she hadn't just taken a seat. She had bought the entire kingdom while I was busy looking the other way. My name is Evan Caldwell, and I have always believed that the world belongs to the men who are brave enough to take it. Standing on the balcony of my penthouse, looking down at the city sprawl of Seattle, I felt like a titan surveying his kingdom. It was 7 a.m. The sky was a bruised purple turning into gold, and the air was crisp, smelling of rain and money. I adjusted the cuffs of my bespoke Italian suit, running my thumb over the silk fabric. It cost $3,000, a trivial expense for a man in my position, but essential for the image. In my line of work, perception is reality, and I was the vice president of business development at Northridge Systems. I was the rainmaker. I was the golden boy. And today, I was going to cement my legacy. I turned back into the living room, the floor-to-ceiling glass walls insulating me from the noise of the traffic below. The interior was sleek, modern, and expensive, all chrome, leather, and abstract art that I pretended to understand because it impressed the guests. Sitting at the dining table, bathed in the morning light, was my wife, Everly. Seeing her there almost broke my mood. Everly was the human equivalent of beige wallpaper. She was wearing a simple gray cardigan that probably cost $50 and had her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was hunched over a stack of documents, a calculator by her side, frowning at a spreadsheet. She looked like a librarian who had gotten lost in a GQ photo shoot. I walked over to the espresso machine, the noise of the grinder filling the silence. Everly did not look up. She was always doing this, obsessing over the household accounts, tracking every cent as if we were on the brink of poverty. It was pathetic, really. I brought in mid-six figures in base salary alone, not counting the bonuses that could easily double that, yet she acted like buying the wrong brand of detergent would bankrupt us. "Good morning, Evan," she said, her voice soft and monotonous. She finally looked up, her eyes tired behind her reading glasses. "Morning," I replied, taking a sip of the dark, bitter coffee. "Still playing accountant? I thought we hired people for that. I am just reviewing the quarterly statements for the family trust and your expense reports," she said, tapping a pen against the paper. "There are some discrepancies in the withdrawals from the joint investment account. Evan, large cash transfers. I just want to make sure nothing has been compromised." I suppressed a sigh. This was Everly in a nutshell. Small-minded, risk-averse, she had no concept of how the big world operated. She saw numbers as limits. I saw them as suggestions. "It is fine, Everly," I said, dismissing her with a wave of my hand. "I moved some capital around for a private venture. You do not need to worry your pretty little head about it. That is why I am the one out there closing deals, and you are here maintaining the fortress." She stared at me for a second, her expression unreadable. Most men would have found that silence unnerving, but I just found it boring. Everly had been useful once. She came from a respectable background, looked good enough in photos during the early years, and provided the stability I needed while I climbed the ladder. But now she was just an anchor, a relic of a version of me that I had outgrown. "I handled it," she said simply, closing the folder. "But be careful, Evan. The tax implications on those transfers could trigger an audit if we are not careful." I laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "An audit? I am Northridge Systems' top earner. I have tax attorneys who cost more an hour than your father made in a month. Stop pinching pennies. Evie, go to the spa, buy a bag. Do something other than stare at spreadsheets." I grabbed my briefcase, leaning down to give her a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. Her skin was cool. She did not lean into it. She just went back to her papers, fading into the background of my life where she belonged. As I took the private elevator down to the garage, the irritation faded, replaced by the thrill of the day ahead. I slid into the driver's seat of my Aston Martin, the leather groaning softly under my weight. The engine roared to life, a guttural sound that vibrated in my chest. This was power. This was control. The drive to the Northridge headquarters was a blur of speed and confidence. I wove through the morning traffic, cutting off a sedan here, speeding past a truck there. The rules of the road were like the rules of business. They were there to keep the sheep in line, not the wolves. Northridge Systems was in chaos, and I loved it. 2 weeks ago, news had broken that the company had been acquired, a hostile takeover by a massive, shadowy conglomerate known as the Phoenix Group. Nobody knew who was behind it. The board had been dissolved. The old CEO had been given a golden parachute and shoved out the door, and panic had spread through the middle management like a virus. Everyone was terrified of the axe falling. Everyone except me. I pulled into my reserved parking spot, right next to the entrance. I stepped out, buttoning my jacket, and walked into the lobby. The air inside was tense. Secretaries were whispering in huddles, stopping abruptly when I walked by. Junior executives looked pale, clutching their coffees as if they were life preservers. They smelled the blood in the water. They knew that when a new ownership group took over, heads rolled. But I knew something they did not. New owners did not fire the people who made them money. They fired the dead weight. They fired the people like Everly, the cautious ones, the ones who followed the rules and slowed things down. They needed aggressors. They needed visionaries. They needed me. I breezed past the security desk, nodding to the guard who scrambled to salute me. The elevator ride to the top floor, the executive suite, felt like an ascension. Today was the first all-hands strategy meeting with the new leadership. The mysterious new CEO was finally going to reveal themselves. Rumors were flying wild. Some said it was a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. Others said it was a ruthless corporate raider from New York. It did not matter who it was. I had prepared a dossier that would blow them away. I had numbers that proved I was responsible for 40% of the company's growth over the last 3 years. I was the engine of Northridge. Without me, this place was just a building full of servers and terrified middle-aged men. I walked into my office, throwing my briefcase on the mahogany desk. My assistant, Sarah, was already there, looking nervous. "Mr. Caldwell," she stammered, "the meeting is in 1 hour. Everyone is already gathering in the main conference room. The atmosphere is heavy. Relax." "Sarah," I said, leaning back in my chair and putting my feet up on the desk. "Let them sweat. Fear is a good motivator for the weak. For us, it is just noise." I checked my watch. 8:30 in the morning. It was time. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. "Are you here?" The reply came instantly. "Parking now. I am nervous. Evan." I smiled. "Do not be. Today, we take over." This was my masterstroke. My ace in the hole. I wasn't just bringing my performance numbers to this meeting. I was bringing the future. Her name was Ava Moore. Ava was everything Everly was not. She was 24 years old, sharp as a tack, and hungry. She had started as an intern in marketing 6 months ago, and I had plucked her from obscurity. I saw the spark in her immediately. She wasn't just beautiful, with her cascade of red hair and eyes that could cut glass. She was ambitious. She wanted the world, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get it. I had molded her. I had taught her how to dress, how to speak, how to walk into a room and command attention. I had created a role for her, Junior Strategic Liaison, a title that meant nothing but sounded impressive enough to get her into high-level meetings. Sure, I had bypassed HR protocols to get her the salary she wanted. Sure, I had buried her travel expenses under client entertainment in the budget, but it was an investment. Ava was the face of the new Northridge I wanted to build. Young, aggressive, and completely loyal to me, bringing a mistress to a board meeting on the day the new CEO arrived. It was insane. It was suicidal by conventional standards, but I wasn't conventional. It was a power move. It signaled that I was so confident, so untouchable, that I could rewrite the social contract of the office. It showed that I wasn't afraid of the new management. I was presenting myself as a package deal. Me, the seasoned veteran with the connections, and Ava, the fresh talent with the energy. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city again. I could see my reflection in the glass. I looked good. I looked like a winner. I thought about Everly back at the penthouse, probably clipping coupons or worrying about the price of organic eggs. She had no idea who I really was anymore. She thought I was just her husband, the man who came home late because he was working hard for the family. She didn't know that I had built a separate life, a life of excitement and adrenaline, a life that was about to pay off in dividends she couldn't even comprehend. I checked my reflection one last time. Tie straight, hair perfect, eyes clear. I walked out of my office and headed toward the elevator that would take me down to the reception to meet Ava. I wanted us to walk in together. I wanted the visual impact. When the elevator doors opened, she was standing there. She was wearing a crimson dress that skirted the line between professional and provocative. Exactly as I had instructed. She held a leather portfolio against her chest, her knuckles white. She looked terrified, but beneath the fear, I saw the excitement. She knew what this meant. This was her coronation as much as it was mine. "Evan," she whispered as I approached. "Are you sure about this? People are going to stare. Let them stare." "Ava," I said, taking her arm and guiding her toward the conference room. "They stare at the sun, too. It means we are shining. But the new CEO," she started, "the new CEO is going to see the two most valuable assets in this company." I interrupted, my voice low and firm. "You are with me, and I do not lose." We walked down the long corridor toward the main boardroom. The hallway was lined with portraits of past executives, old white men who had played it safe and retired with gold watches. I was going to be bigger than all of them. I could feel the eyes of the staff on us as we passed the cubicles. I heard the murmurs, the shock. "Is that Evan? Who is that with him? Is that the intern? What is he doing?" I fed on their confusion. Disruption was the first step to dominance. We reached the heavy oak double doors of the boardroom. Inside, the entire executive team, the board of directors for the transition, and the legal teams would be waiting. The air conditioning was humming, a low drone of anticipation. I paused with my hand on the brass handle. I looked at Ava. "Chin up," I told her. "Shoulders back. You belong here because I say you belong here." She took a deep breath, nodded, and the mask of the fierce corporate shark slipped into place over her pretty features. She was ready. I pushed the doors open. The conversation inside the room died instantly. It was like someone had cut the power. 20 faces turned toward us. I saw the CFO, a man I had bullied for years, widen his eyes in disbelief. I saw the HR director open her mouth and then close it, too stunned to speak. I didn't apologize for being late. I didn't explain why I had a junior employee on my arm. I just walked to the front of the room, near the head of the table where the empty chair for the new CEO waited. I pulled out a chair for Ava, right next to mine, in the inner circle of power. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "I hope we are ready to make some history today." I sat down, leaning back, claiming the space. I looked around the table, meeting every gaze until they looked away. They were terrified. They didn't know what was happening, and that gave me the advantage. I was the king of this jungle. I had the numbers. I had the girl. I had the confidence. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. "Come on, then," I thought. "Bring on the new boss. Let's see if they can keep up with Evan Caldwell." I had no idea that the ground beneath my feet was not solid rock, but a trapdoor waiting to swing open. I had no idea that while I was playing checkers, someone else had been playing three-dimensional chess for years. I sat there, smug and untouchable, checking my watch, tapping my fingers on the mahogany, completely unaware that the countdown to my destruction had already hit 0. The illusion of control is a funny thing. It feels exactly like real control, right up until the moment you fall. And I was falling. I just hadn't hit the bottom yet. I watched Ava smooth the skirt of her crimson dress beneath the table, her fingers trembling ever so slightly against the polished mahogany. To anyone else, that small quiver might have looked like fear. To me, it looked like anticipation, It was the vibration of a racehorse inside the starting gate, waiting for the bell to ring. She caught my eye, and I gave her a microscopic nod. "Stay the course." The nod said, "We are untouchable." It was amusing to think that less than 6 months ago, Ava Moore had been fetching coffee for the marketing department, buried under a pile of meaningless spreadsheets and wearing off-the-rack suits that did her absolutely no favors. She had been raw material then, unrefined, potential energy waiting for a catalyst. I was that catalyst. I saw the hunger in her eyes during a departmental mixer, a hunger that mirrored my own. She did not just want a job, she wanted a life. She wanted the kind of life that I lived, the kind that Everly, in her infinite dullness, seemed to actively resent. I had reinvented Ava. I crafted her image with the same precision I used to structure a multi-million-dollar acquisition deal. The title she held today, Special Strategic Liaison to the Vice President, was a masterpiece of corporate fiction. It sounded essential, weighty, and authoritative. It suggested that she was the bridge between vision and execution. In reality, it was a ghost role. I had carved the position out of a surplus in the external consultancy budget, bypassing the standard human resources hiring freeze by classifying her as a specialized contractor before converting her to full-time under a different operational code. The salary I arranged for her was nearly double what the senior analysts were making, a fact that would have caused a riot if it ever leaked. But I made sure it did not leak. I controlled the narrative. To the rest of the company, Ava was a prodigy I had discovered, a necessary asset for our high-level client interactions. And if the budget for her wardrobe came out of the Client Gifting and Retention Fund, well, she was a gift to the company's image, was she not? I looked around the boardroom table. The tension was thick enough to choke a man. Sitting across from me was Gary, the chief financial officer. He was a sweating, balding man who looked like he was constantly waiting for a tax audit. He was staring at Ava, his eyes darting between her and me. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was doing the mental math on her presence here. He knew about the expense reports. He had seen the receipts for the dinners at Le Bernardin, the flights to first-class suites in Dubai, the seminars in Napa Valley that were nothing more than wine tastings. Gary knew all of it, but Gary would not say a word. He would not speak because he was a coward, and more importantly, because he knew that Northridge Systems survived on the revenue I brought in. I was the golden goose. You do not ask questions about the goose's personal life. You just collect the eggs. Last fiscal year, my division accounted for 65% of the company's total profit margin. I had single-handedly closed the deal with the government defense sector that saved our Q4 earnings, as long as the money kept flowing. I could have brought a circus pony into this boardroom, and Gary would have nodded and asked if the pony needed some water. That is the beauty of the corporate world. It pretends to be about rules and ethics, about human resources and conduct policies, but when you strip away the varnish, it is only about one thing: value. I had value, infinite value, and that gave me the power to rewrite reality. I leaned back in my chair, interlacing my fingers behind my head, deliberately exposing the vulnerability of my throat to show I had no fear of predators. "So, Gary," I said, my voice booming in the quiet room, "heard anything about our new overlords? Or are we still playing guessing games?" Gary jumped slightly. "Well, Evan, the transition team has been very tight-lipped. The Phoenix Group is notoriously private. We do not even know the gender of the new CEO, let alone their background." I laughed. A rich, dismissive sound. Private usually means they have deep pockets and zero patience for incompetence. I think we are going to get along just fine. I saw a few of the other VPs exchange glances. They hated me. I could feel their resentment radiating off them like heat from a pavement. They hated that I was younger, better looking, and richer than they would ever be. They hated that I drove an Aston Martin while they drove Volvos. And they especially hated that I was sitting here with Ava, a stunning 24-year-old embodiment of my vitality, while they were likely thinking about their alimony payments or their cholesterol levels. But their hate was toothless. I had made sure of that. Over the last 48 hours, while the rest of them were panic buying resume paper. I had been executing a silent coup. I knew the new management would be looking for reasons to trim the fat. They would want to know why profits had stagnated in certain sectors. They would want scapegoats. So, I gave them some. Late last night, at nearly 2 a.m, I had sent a series of confidential memos to the transition team's secure server. I had framed the narrative perfectly. I blamed the logistics department for the supply chain bottlenecks that were actually caused by my aggressive overselling. I pointed out leadership vacuums in the human resources department to deflect from the high turnover rate in my own team. I even drafted a detailed analysis of why the legal department was too risk-averse, citing their hesitation on contracts that I had pushed through anyway. I had painted a picture where I was the only competent captain on a sinking ship, surrounded by dead weight. When the new CEO walked through those doors, they would already have my version of the truth sitting in their inbox. They would look around this table and see a room full of liabilities and one shining asset. Ava shifted in her seat, and I placed a calming hand on her forearm. Her skin was warm. I remembered the first time I took her to a client meeting. It was with the CEO of a major logistics firm in Dallas, a man known for being old-fashioned and difficult. Ava had been terrified. Just sit there and look pretty? She had asked me in the car. No, I had told her. Looking pretty is passive. I want you to look expensive, laugh at his jokes, but only the ones that are actually funny. Pour his wine before his glass is empty, but do not act like a servant. Act like a hostess. And when he looks at you, hold his gaze for exactly 3 seconds before looking at me. It makes him feel like he is competing for your attention, but I have already won it. She had played the part perfectly. The client had been so enamored by her charm, so impressed by the young talent at Northridge, that he signed a 5-year renewal without even negotiating the rates, that night, in the hotel room. Ava had looked at me with wide, worshipful eyes. You play them like instruments. Evan, she had said. People are instruments. Ava, I had replied. You just have to know which strings to pull. Now, she was ready for the main stage. She believed in me with a religious fervor. To her, I was not just a boss or a lover. I was a god. She walked through the office hallways with her head held high, ignoring the whispers of the secretaries and the jealous glares of the female managers. She knew she was protected. She knew she was with the winner. The rumors about the new CEO had been spiraling out of control for days. People said it was a ruthless liquidator from Chicago. People said it was a foreign investor group that would strip the company for parts. The fear was palpable. I could smell it on them, a mix of stale coffee and desperation. But I felt nothing but exhilaration. Chaos is a ladder, and I was the only one climbing. I checked my watch again. 10 minutes past the hour. This was a power move by the new CEO, making us wait, letting us stew in our own anxiety. It was a classic tactic. I respected it. Is it always this quiet? Ava whispered to me, leaning close so her breath brushed my ear. Only when they are scared. I whispered back, loud enough for Gary to hear. Watch them. Ava, this is what mediocrity looks like when it is cornered. I saw the vice president of operations clench his jaw. Good. Let him be angry. Anger makes people sloppy. I wanted them all off balance when the new boss arrived. I wanted them stuttering and sweating while I remained cool, calm, and collected. I had prepared my opening line. When the CEO walked in, I would be the first to stand. I would extend my hand. I would say, "Welcome to Northridge. We have been waiting for leadership that matches our ambition." It was a perfect line, flattering, yet asserting my own dominance. It separated me from the herd. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table again. The leather was pristine, waiting for its new occupant. I imagined myself in that chair one day. It was inevitable. The new owners would need a local operator, someone who knew the business inside and out. Who else could they choose? Gary? He could barely order lunch without a committee meeting. No, the crown was waiting for me, and Ava was the queen I had chosen to sit beside me. I thought of Everly again, briefly, like a fleeting shadow. She was probably at the grocery store right now, comparing the prices of laundry detergent, or maybe she was meeting with that dusty old lawyer of hers, talking about estate planning or whatever nonsense she used to fill her empty days. She had no idea that her husband was about to become the king of the industry. She lived in a small, gray world. I lived in Technicolor. I tapped my pen on the table. A rhythmic, military beat. Rap, rap, rap. The sound echoed in the silence. It was the sound of a clock counting down. But I did not know it was counting down for me. I thought it was the drum roll for my victory parade. I looked at Ava. She smiled at me. A confident, predatory smile that I had taught her. She adjusted her portfolio, making sure the Northridge logo was visible. Inside that portfolio was a notepad where she had written down key talking points I had given her, phrases like synergistic growth and market penetration strategies. It did not matter if she understood them deep down. It only mattered that she said them with conviction. We were a team. The future of this company. The new dynasty. The heavy silence of the room was a canvas, and I was painting my masterpiece upon it. I was so full of myself, so drunk on my own perceived magnificence, that I failed to notice the obvious. I failed to notice that the security guard by the door was standing a little straighter than usual. I failed to notice the faint vibration of the floorboards that signaled a large group approaching down the hall. I was too busy admiring the reflection of the man I thought I was to see the monster coming to eat him. Suddenly, the handle of the double doors turned. The sound was sharp, metallic, and final. "Here we go," I said softly to Ava. "Showtime." I fixed my tie one last time, plastered on my most charming sharks-in-the-water smile, and turned my body toward the entrance. I was ready to greet my future. I was ready to shake the hand of the person who would give me everything I deserved. I had no idea that the hand I was about to see was wearing a wedding ring I had bought 10 years ago. If I had taken even 1 second to look past my own reflection in the mirror, I might have noticed the shark swimming in my own living room, but I did not. To me, Everly was just background noise. She was the static on the radio while I was trying to tune into the music of my own success. In my mind, I had categorized my wife into a very neat, very small box. The label on that box read, domestic, safe, boring. Everly was the kind of woman who wore comfortable shoes and made sure the napkins matched the tablecloth. She was the woman who remembered birthdays and organized charity bake sales. In the high-stakes poker game of corporate warfare, I saw her as a spectator, someone who did not even know the rules, let alone how to play a hand. I remember a specific evening, about 3 weeks before the acquisition news broke. I had come home late, reeking of a steakhouse dinner and the expensive perfume Ava wore. I found Everly in her usual spot, sitting in the wingback chair by the fireplace, a book resting on her lap. It was not a romance novel or a fashion magazine. It was a dense biography of a 19th century industrialist. At the time, I thought it was just her trying to look intellectual. Now, I realized she was studying strategy. She looked up as I loosened my tie. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, her skin pale, her eyes dark and unreadable. "You are late, Evan," she said. Her voice was flat, not angry, just observant. "Client dinner." I lied smoothly. "It is second nature to me. The Japanese delegation is in town. You know how they are. They expect the full treatment. Drinks, dinner, late-night talks. It is all part of the game." Everly closed her book. She did not ask who was there. She did not sniff my collar. She just watched me. It was a gaze that felt like a scanner at an airport security checkpoint, stripping away the layers. I noticed a transfer from the joint savings account yesterday. She said, $10,000. It went to a limited liability company I do not recognize. More Consulting Group. Who are they? My heart did not even skip a beat. I was so used to her asking these petty little questions. To me, it was like a child asking why the sky is blue. She could not possibly understand the complexities of my financial maneuvering. I walked over to the sidebar and poured myself a scotch. "It is a retainer, Everly." For an external analyst, we are bringing in some fresh eyes to look at the quarterly projections. I had to pay it out of pocket to expedite the process because the procurement department is too slow. I will get reimbursed next month. Do not worry about it. She tilted her head slightly. It is strange, though. I looked up the registration for more consulting. It was incorporated only 2 days before the transfer, and the registered agent is a residential address in a rent-controlled apartment complex downtown. I paused with the glass halfway to my mouth. I felt a flicker of annoyance. Why was she digging? Why did she care? Evie, I said, using the nickname I knew she tolerated but did not like. You are looking at raw data without context. That is the problem with you. You see a number and you panic. Business is fluid. Sometimes we use shell entities to protect proprietary data. It is standard practice. You would know that if you ever stepped foot inside a boardroom instead of a garden club. I took a drink, letting the burn of the alcohol settle my nerves. I expected her to argue. I expected her to nag. That is what wives in movies did. They screamed. They cried. They demanded the truth. But Everly did not scream. She just looked at me for a long moment, and then she nodded. I see, she said softly. Standard practice. I suppose I have been out of the loop for too long. She stood up and walked past me toward the kitchen. As she passed, she did not look defeated. She looked satisfied, like she had just confirmed a hypothesis. I mistook her silence for submission. I thought I had dazzled her with buzzwords and shut her down with my superior tone. I was an idiot. She wasn't accepting my lie. She was filing it away. She was adding it to a dossier. What I had conveniently forgotten, or perhaps what I had chosen to ignore, was that Everly had not always been a housewife. When we met, 10 years ago, she was working at a boutique investment firm in Chicago. I was a junior sales rep, loud and hungry, and she was an analyst. I remembered her being quiet back then, too. I remembered thinking she was efficient but uninspired. We got married, and she quit her job to support my career, to manage the home, to be the foundation while I built the skyscraper. I told myself she quit because she could not handle the pressure. I told myself she preferred the quiet life. I rewrote our history to suit my ego. I convinced myself that she was lucky to have me, the breadwinner, the star. But there were signs. God, there were so many signs. There was her legal advisor, Mr. Sterling. I had met him a few times. He was an ancient man with a trembling hand and a suit that looked like it smelled of mothballs. He had been her family's lawyer for decades. Whenever he came over, they would shut themselves in the study for hours. I assumed they were discussing her parents' meager estate, or maybe updating her will. I never bothered to join them. I thought it was boring family administrative work. Hey, tell the crypt keeper I said hello. I would joke as she closed the study door. She would just smile that thin ghost of a smile. He is very sharp. Evan, you should talk to him sometime. He specializes in corporate restructuring. I had laughed. Restructuring? The guy looks like he is restructuring his own skeleton just to stand up. I never asked what they were really discussing. I never asked why a meager estate lawyer was visiting once a week for the last 6 months. I never asked why Everly, who supposedly pinched pennies on groceries, kept a lawyer on retainer who charged $500 an hour. I just didn't care. As long as she wasn't asking me where I was on Friday nights. She could talk to whoever she wanted. Then there were the trips. Over the last year, Everly had started traveling more. Visiting her aunt in Boston, going to a wellness retreat in Arizona, helping a friend move in San Francisco. I loved those trips. Those were the weekends I could bring Ava to the penthouse. We would drink my expensive wine, sleep in my bed, and laugh about how easy it all was. I never checked Everly's flight details. I never asked for photos of the aunt or the friend. I was just glad the house was empty. I remember one trip specifically. It was 2 months ago. Everly said she was going to New York for a gallery opening. Have fun looking at paintings. I had said, distracted by an email from Ava. Buy something nice for the hallway. I will, she had replied. I'm looking for something distinct, something that changes the whole perspective of the room. I didn't know then that the gallery she was visiting was the headquarters of the Phoenix Group. I didn't know that while I was sneaking Ava into a hotel room in downtown Seattle, my wife was sitting in a corner office in Manhattan, negotiating the terms of a hostile takeover. I looked at her as a woman who had given up, a woman who had let herself go. She wore loose sweaters and flat shoes. She didn't dye her hair. She didn't get Botox. In my world, where appearance was currency, she was bankrupt. But that was her camouflage. Everly understood that men like me, men intoxicated by our own importance, stop noticing anything that doesn't glitter. We're like magpies. We chase whatever shines. We chase the Avas of the world, and while we're hypnotized by the flash, we fail to see the shadow sliding quietly across the floor. She turned my arrogance into a weapon. She knew I'd never bother checking the household servers. She knew I wouldn't question her girl trips. She knew I'd dismiss every financial discrepancy with a smug little lecture about business complexity. She handed me exactly enough slack to walk myself straight into my own trap, and I stepped in with a smile. Even her response to my late nights was deliberate. A normal wife, a wife who was truly emotionally invested in the marriage, would have fought. She would have raised hell. She would have demanded answers. She would have checked my phone. Everly did none of that. When I stumbled in at 2 a.m, reeking of gin and someone else's perfume, she'd just be getting up for a glass of water. "Did you close the deal?" she would ask. That question haunts me now. "Did you close the deal?" "Yes." I would say, "It is done. Good." She would reply, "Documentation is important. Evan, make sure you keep everything documented." I thought she was being a nag. I thought she was obsessing over paperwork. I didn't realize she was telling me to create the paper trail that she would eventually use to bury me. She wasn't asking if I had sex with my mistress. She was asking if I had completed the act of self-destruction, sitting in that boardroom now, waiting for the door to open. I thought about the text I had received from her this morning. "Good luck today. Evan, I know you have been waiting for this for a long time. Everything you have done has led to this moment, at the time." I read it as the supportive, pathetic message of a devoted wife. I smirked when I read it. I showed it to Ava in the car. "Look," I said, "she has no clue." Now, replaying it in my head, the words sounded different. They sounded ominous. Everything you have done has led to this moment. It wasn't a wish for luck. It was a verdict. I looked across the table at the other executives. They were all sweating, nervous about the unknown CEO. I was the only one smiling. I was the only one who felt safe. I had my secret weapon, Ava, next to me. I had my falsified reports ready to present. I had my narrative of success polished to a shine. I had underestimated the one person in my life who actually mattered. I had treated Everly like a piece of furniture, forgetting that even a chair has legs, and if you kick them hard enough, the whole thing collapses on top of you. I thought about the silence of my house, the way Everly moved through rooms without making a sound, the way she listened more than she spoke. I had mistaken that silence for emptiness. I didn't know that silence is also the sound of a fuse burning down, the simple housewife, the retired analyst, the woman who didn't understand business. She understood business better than I ever did, because while I was playing the game of quarterly gains and office politics, she was playing a much older, much darker game. She was playing the long game, and in the long game, you don't show your cards until everyone else has already gone all in. I was all in. My chips were in the middle of the table. Ava was my ace, my reputation was my stake, and Everly was the dealer. And she had been stacking the deck since the day I first betrayed her. The door handle turned, the heavy wood groaned. I straightened my tie, I prepared my smile. I was ready to charm the new boss. I had no idea that the woman walking through that door wasn't coming to shake my hand. She was coming to cut it off. The air inside the main boardroom on the 42nd floor of Northridge Systems was always kept at exactly 68 degrees, but today it felt colder. It was a sterile, aggressive cold, the kind that seeped through wool suits and settled into the marrow of your bones. This room was designed for intimidation. The walls were soundproofed glass, offering a panoramic view of the gray Seattle skyline while sealing us off from the rest of the world like specimens in a cryogenic chamber. I had timed our arrival down to the second. The memo stated the meeting would begin at 9 o'clock sharp. I checked my watch as we stepped out of the elevator. It was 9 and 3 minutes. Perfect. In the corporate world, showing up early showed anxiety. Showing up on time showed obedience. Showing up late? That showed power. It showed that your time was more valuable than the collective time of everyone waiting for you. I placed my hand on the small of Ava's back. I could feel the tension in her muscles, tight as a violin string. "Relax," I murmured, my voice low and steady. "You are not a guest here. Ava, you are a conqueror. Walk like you own the carpet." She took a sharp breath, nodded, and we moved. When I pushed those heavy oak doors open, I made sure they swung wide. We did not slip in. We invaded. The conversation inside, which had been a low hum of nervous speculation, died instantly. It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Every head turned, 20 pairs of eyes fixed on us. I saw Marcus, the vice president of operations, scowl. He was a dinosaur of a man, heavy-set and perpetually red-faced, who believed that business was about handshakes and golf games. He hated me because I digitized his entire supply chain and made half his department redundant last year. Beside him sat Linda, the director of human resources, clutching her tablet like a shield. She looked at Ava, then at me. Her lips pursed so tight they were white. They were judging us. I could see the calculations running behind their eyes. Why is the mistress here? Is he insane? Does he know something we do not? That confusion was exactly what I wanted. "Sorry we are late," I said, my voice projecting effortlessly to the back of the room. I did not sound sorry at all. We were finalizing the fourth quarter projection data for the transition team. I figured the new leadership would prioritize accuracy over punctuality. I guided Ava to the empty chair next to mine, right near the head of the table. This was the kill zone. The seats closest to the CEO were reserved for the lieutenants, the trusted advisors. By placing Ava there, I was effectively demoting everyone else in the room. I was telling Marcus and Linda that my 24-year-old assistant had more proximity to power than they did with their 30 years of tenure. "Evan," Linda spoke up, her voice shrill in the silence. "This is a closed session for executive leadership and the transition board only. Miss Moore as well. She is support staff. She does not have clearance for this level of strategic discussion." I stopped pulling out my chair. I stood straight, buttoning my jacket with a slow, deliberate movement. I turned my gaze on Linda. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, long enough to make her squirm. "Clearance?" I repeated, letting a smirk play on my lips. "Linda, look around this table. Half the people here are worried about whether their parking pass is going to work tomorrow. The other half are trying to figure out how to explain why their departments have been bleeding money for 2 fiscal quarters. I gestured toward Ava, who was sitting with her chin up, exactly as I had taught her. The light from the window caught the diamond pendant I had bought her last month, expensed as office equipment. Of course, Ava Moore knows more about the client acquisition strategy of Northridge than anyone else in this building, excluding myself. I continued, my voice hardening. She has personally managed the accounts that are keeping this company solvent. She is not just support staff. Linda, in a room full of people desperately trying to save their own skins. She is the only person I trust to watch my back. The insult landed with a physical weight. I heard a sharp intake of breath from someone down the table. I had just publicly declared that I did not trust my peers. I had drawn a line in the sand. Me and Ava on one side, the rest of the company on the other. Linda opened her mouth to argue, but Marcus put a hand on her arm, stopping her. He shook his head slightly. He was afraid. He knew that if I was this confident, I must have leverage. He did not want to be the one standing in the blast zone when the new CEO walked in. I sat down, the leather chair creaking softly. I winked at Ava. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of adoration and adrenaline. She was high on the conflict. She loved seeing me bully these people who had looked down on her in the break room. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from nervous to suffocating. The air was thick with unspoken resentment. I could feel their eyes boring into me, dissecting me. They were hoping I would fail. They were praying that the new CEO would walk in and fire me on the spot for my arrogance. But they did not understand. Arrogance is only a flaw if you cannot back it up. And I had the numbers. I had the Caldwell report, a 50-page document sitting in front of me that detailed exactly how I planned to double revenue in 12 months. I was not just an employee. I was the architect of the future. I leaned over to Ava, keeping my voice just loud enough to be heard by the people immediately next to us. "Watch Marcus," I whispered. "He is sweating through his shirt. He knows his logistics model is outdated. And watch Linda. She keeps checking her phone. Probably texting her husband to tell him not to book that vacation to Cabo yet." Ava stifled a giggle, covering her mouth with her manicured hand. It was cruel. Yes, but corporate survival is not a team sport. It is a gladiator match, and the crowd loves blood. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. It was a massive, high-backed ergonomic throne that looked like it cost $5,000. Who was going to sit there? My mind raced through the possibilities. I had heard rumors of a tech mogul from Silicon Valley, a guy who wore hoodies and sneakers. I had heard rumors of a German efficiency expert. I hoped it was the latter. I spoke the language of efficiency. I could sell ice to a polar bear if the margin was right. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment the rocket left the launch pad. I was going to be the right hand. The new CEO would need a guide in this strange land. And I was the only one with a map. I imagined the conversation we would have later. "Evan," they would say, "you are the only one who gets it. Let us clean house together." I would ask for Marcus's office. I would fire Linda myself, and I would give Ava a corner suite with a view of the bay. The waiting became unbearable. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the server banks in the distance and the rhythmic tapping of my own pen on the mahogany table. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of destiny knocking. I looked at the other faces around the table. They looked like prisoners waiting for the warden. Pale, shaking, defeated. They had already accepted their fate. They were just hoping for mercy. I did not want mercy. I wanted power. Suddenly, the heavy silence was shattered. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. These were not the scuffling steps of an assistant or the hurried pace of a courier. These were slow, deliberate, rhythmic steps. Click, clack. Click, clack. Hard soles on marble floors. The sound got louder, closer. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Linda put her tablet face down on the table. I sat up straighter. I adjusted my tie. I shot one last look at Ava. "Here we go," I mouthed. The footsteps stopped right outside the double doors. For a second, nothing happened. The pause was theatrical, masterful. Whoever was on the other side of that door knew exactly how to build suspense. I respected it. Then, the brass handle began to turn. Slowly. I kept my eyes glued to that handle. I was ready to spring into action. I was ready to be the first one to stand, the first one to smile, the first one to welcome the new king. I was so focused on the door that I did not notice the look on Ava's face. She had gone pale. She was staring at the door with a strange expression. Not excitement, but something closer to dread. Maybe she sensed something I did not. Animals often sense an earthquake before the ground actually shakes, but I was no animal. I was the master of the universe. The latch clicked. The doors began to swing inward. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I wanted to be the tallest thing in the room when the new CEO entered. I wanted to be the landmark they navigated by. "Good morning," I prepared to boom out, my hand already extending for the handshake that would seal my fate. The doors opened fully, and for the first time in my life, the words died in my throat. The smile froze on my face, turning into a rictus of confusion. The person standing there was not a man in a hoodie. It was not a German efficiency expert. It was a woman. She was flanked by 4 lawyers in dark suits, looking like a phalanx of executioners. But I did not look at them. I could not look at them. My eyes were locked on the woman in the center. She was wearing a tailored white suit that looked like it had been cut from a cloud and sharpened with a razor blade. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was cascading down her shoulders in polished, glossy waves. Her face was framed by designer glasses that I had never seen before, but I knew the face, I knew the eyes, I knew the mouth that was currently set in a line of grim determination. My brain misfired. It refused to process the visual data. Error, does not compute. I blinked, waiting for the hallucination to pass. I thought maybe I had had a stroke. I thought maybe the stress had finally cracked my mind, because the woman standing in the doorway, the woman radiating an aura of absolute terrifying power, was not a stranger. It was the woman I had left at home this morning wearing a $50 cardigan. It was the woman I had told to go buy groceries. It was my wife, and she was not looking at me. She was looking through me, as if I were made of glass, and she was the hammer coming to shatter it. The moment stretched. It was elastic, pulling tight until it snapped against the back of my skull. My brain was a high-performance engine that had suddenly seized. I stood there, half risen from my chair, my hand extended over the mahogany table in a gesture of welcome that now looked like a desperate plea for help. I was smiling, but I could feel the expression cracking, like dried mud falling off a wall. The woman standing in the doorway was Everly. There was no debating it. It was the same nose, the same curve of the jaw, the same height. But it was not my Everly. My Everly was soft edges and muted colors. My Everly was a woman who apologized to the waiter when they got her order wrong. This woman was a blade. She stepped into the room, and the sound of her heels on the parquet floor was a declaration of war. Click, clack, click, clack. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly heavy. She was not walking like a guest. She was walking like a landlord coming to evict a squatter. Behind her, 4 men in charcoal suits flowed into the room like oil. They were not the standard corporate legal team we had at Northridge, the ones with ill-fitting jackets and tired eyes. These men were predators. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace, carrying leather briefcases that looked like they contained nuclear codes. They fanned out, flanking her, creating a protective phalanx that separated her from the rest of us commoners. My mind started frantically cycling through explanations, desperately trying to reject the reality in front of me. She is here to embarrass me. I thought, that had to be it. She had found out about Ava. She had snapped. She had come to the office to make a scene, to scream and cry and throw things. It was a hysterical, jealous wife moment. I felt a surge of anger. How dare she? How dare she bring her domestic drama into my boardroom? I was about to close the biggest deal of my career. I was about to meet the new CEO. And here was Everly, dragging her suburban grievances into the sanctuary of high finance. Evie? I blurted out. The word hung in the silent room, sounding small and pathetic. I stepped out from behind the table, my instincts shifting from greet the boss to manage the crisis. I needed to get her out of here before the real CEO arrived. I needed to usher her into the hallway, hiss a few threats at her, and send her back to the penthouse where she belonged. Evie, you cannot be in here, I said, my voice tight with suppressed rage. We are in the middle of a transition meeting. You need to leave, now. I reached for her arm, intending to steer her toward the door. One of the suits moved. He did not run. He just materialized between us. He was a foot taller than me, with a face like a slab of granite. He held up a hand, palm open, stopping me in my tracks without even touching me. Please step back. Mr. Caldwell, the man said. His voice was a low rumble. Devoid of any emotion, I blinked, stunned. Who were these people? Had she hired private security to confront her husband? Everly did not even look at me. She did not flinch when I spoke. She did not acknowledge my presence. She walked past me as if I were a potted plant in the lobby. She kept her eyes forward, fixed on the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair I had been coveting all morning. She reached the head of the table. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning vents and the terrified breathing of Marcus, the VP of Operations. Everly placed a thin, black folder on the table. Then, with a motion that was smooth and practiced, she pulled out the heavy leather chair, the chair of the CEO. "No," I whispered. My brain was screaming. "No, you do not sit there. That is for the boss. That is for the owner. Get up. You are ruining everything." She sat. She adjusted the lapels of her white suit, crossed her legs, and rested her hands on the table. Her fingers were interlaced. She looked comfortable. She looked like she had been born in that chair. Only then did she raise her eyes. She swept her gaze across the room, moving from face to face. She looked at Gary, the CFO, who was trembling. She looked at Linda, who had turned a ghostly shade of white. She looked at Marcus. It was a look of appraisal. It was the look a butcher gives a carcass, deciding where to make the first cut. Finally, her eyes landed on me. For a second, I expected to see warmth. I expected to see recognition. I expected to see the woman who had made me toast that morning, but there was nothing. Her eyes were two chips of obsidian, cold, hard, dead. It was like looking into the eyes of a statue. She looked at me, then past me, to the woman sitting frozen in the chair next to mine. She looked at Ava. Ava was paralyzed. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were blue. She looked at Everly, then at me, her eyes wide with panic. She was waiting for me to fix this. She was waiting for me to laugh and say it was all a misunderstanding. But I could not move. I was rooted to the spot, my hand still half raised, my mouth slightly open. The man who had blocked me, the tall one with the granite face, stepped forward. He walked to the side of the table, standing to Everly's right. He placed a briefcase on the table and snapped the locks open. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the silence. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," the man said. His voice was crisp, articulate, and carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Arthur Sterling, lead counsel for the Phoenix Group." My stomach dropped. Sterling? The name triggered a memory. The old man. The crypt keeper I had mocked. This man wasn't old. He was in his 40s, sharp and lethal. Was he the son? The partner? Sterling continued, his eyes scanning the room with disdain. "As you know, the Phoenix Group completed the acquisition of Northridge Systems 72 hours ago. We have spent the last 6 months analyzing the structural and financial health of this organization. Today marks the beginning of the restructuring process." He paused, letting the word restructuring hang in the air. We all knew what that meant. It meant blood. "It is my distinct privilege," Sterling said, gesturing to the woman sitting at the head of the table, "to introduce you to the chairwoman and chief executive officer of the Phoenix Group, the majority shareholder and the architect of this acquisition." He looked at me. He looked right into my eyes, and a small, cruel smile touched the corner of his mouth. Ms. Everly Gonzalez. The name hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Gonzalez, not Caldwell. Gonzalez. She had used her maiden name. She had erased me. In the legal paperwork, in the corporate filings, in the history of this takeover, I did not exist. She was not Everly Caldwell, the wife of the VP. She was Everly Gonzalez, the conqueror. The room erupted into a vacuum of shock. I saw heads turn violently. I saw jaws drop. Gary let out a small squeak of disbelief. I staggered back a step, my legs hitting the edge of my own chair. I collapsed into it, not because I wanted to sit, but because my knees had turned to water. "This is a joke," I muttered. I thought I was whispering, but in the dead silence, my voice sounded hysterical. "Evie, stop it. This is not funny. Tell them who you are." Everly turned her head slowly. She looked at me with an expression of mild curiosity, as if I were a heckler in the back of a theater. I just did. "Mr. Caldwell, she said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the soft, domestic voice I knew. It was deeper, resonant, stripping away all the warmth. It was a voice that gave orders, not requests. Mr. Caldwell? She called me Mr. Caldwell? But I stammered. I felt the heat rising in my face. I looked around the room, desperate for an ally. Look, everyone, this is my wife. This is Everly. She is playing a prank. She stays at home. She does not run a conglomerate. She clips coupons. I pointed at her, my finger shaking. She thinks she is the CEO? I laughed. A jagged, manic sound. She does not know the difference between a balance sheet and a grocery list. I looked at Ava, pleading with her to join me in the laughter. Ava, tell them this is insane. But Ava was not laughing. Ava was staring at Everly with a look of dawning horror. Ava was smart, smarter than me. In that moment, she saw the suits. She saw the deference of the lawyers. She saw the way Everly occupied the space. Ava knew this was real, and she knew we were dead. Everly did not get angry at my outburst. She did not defend herself. She simply turned to Sterling. Mr. Sterling, she said coolly. Please ensure the recording minutes reflect that the Vice President of Business Development is struggling to accept the transition. It is noted. Ms. Gonzalez, Sterling replied, tapping something on a tablet. Everly opened the black folder in front of her. She took out a gold fountain pen, a pen I recognized. I had given it to her for our 5th anniversary. I had bought it at the airport duty-free because I had forgotten the date. I thought she had lost it years ago. Shall we begin? She asked, addressing the room but ignoring me completely. We have a significant amount of discrepancies to review. The reality of the situation began to settle over me like a suffocating blanket. This was not a dream. This was not a prank. The Phoenix Group. The name itself was a clue I had been too blind to see. Rising from the ashes of the career she had sacrificed for me, the ashes of the marriage I had burned down. I remembered the phone calls, the estate planning, the trips to New York, the consulting she did for friends. My God, she had been building this, while I was busy buying expensive suits and sleeping with my assistant. She had been building an empire, and she had bought my company. She owned me, literally. I looked at Ava again. She had pulled her chair slightly away from mine, just an inch or two, but it felt like a mile. She was distancing herself. The rat sensing the ship was already underwater. Evan, she whispered, her voice trembling. You said you knew the new CEO. You said you had it under control. I do, I whispered back, my voice dry as dust. I sleep with her. Ava looked at me with pure venom. Then why is she looking at us like we are something she stepped in on the sidewalk? I had no answer. Everly cleared her throat. The sound commanded instant obedience from everyone in the room. Before we discuss the future of Northridge, she said, her eyes locking onto the screen at the far end of the room, we need to dissect the past. My team has conducted a forensic audit of the last 3 fiscal years. She signaled to one of the lawyers, who dimmed the lights. The projector hummed to life. I sat in the semi-darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I realized then that the boardroom was no longer a place of business. It was a courtroom, and the judge, jury, and executioner was the woman I had spent the last 10 years underestimating. The screen flickered, and the first slide appeared. It was not a graph of profits. It was not a projection of growth. It was a list of names, and at the very top of the list, highlighted in red, was Evan Caldwell. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. This was not just a takeover. This was a public execution, and she had sold tickets to the front row. I looked at Everly's profile in the dim light. She looked magnificent. She looked terrifying. She looked like a stranger. I had brought my mistress to a client meeting to show off my power. I had walked in here thinking I was the king of the jungle, but as Everly turned the page of her folder, the sound echoing like the crack of a whip, I realized the truth. I wasn't the king. I wasn't even the hunter. I was the prey. And the trap had just snapped shut. The projector fan whirred in the silence, a low mechanical drone that sounded like a hive of angry hornets. I sat frozen in my chair, my hands gripping the armrest so tightly that my fingertips had turned white. Beside me, Ava was a statue of terror, her perfect posture collapsing into a hunch, her eyes fixed on the mahogany table, as if she wished she could dissolve into the wood grain. Everly stood by the screen. She held a laser pointer in one hand and the black folder in the other. She did not look at me. She did not acknowledge the fact that we shared a bed, a home, and 10 years of history. To her, I was no longer Evan, her husband. I was a data point. I was a liability on a spreadsheet that she was about to balance. The lights were dimmed, casting long, sharp shadows across the room. The faces of the other executives were pale masks of apprehension. They knew the axe was swinging, but they did not know whose neck it would hit first. "Let us begin with the operational overhead," Everly said. Her voice was devoid of any recognizable human warmth. It was the voice of a machine, crisp, precise, terrifying. She clicked the remote. The slide changed. A complex bar graph appeared, showing a jagged red line spiking upward over the last 3 quarters. "Northridge Systems has been bleeding capital," she stated, walking slowly back and forth in front of the screen. Her heels clicked with a metronomic rhythm. To the untrained eye, or perhaps the willfully blind eye, these spikes look like necessary investments in infrastructure. However, a forensic analysis reveals a different story. She turned to Marcus, the vice president of operations. Marcus flinched as if she had physically struck him. "Mr. Henderson," she said, reading his name off a sheet in her folder without lifting her eyes. "Your department approved 3 major server migrations in the last fiscal year. The total cost was listed at $450,000. Marcus swallowed hard, loosening his tie. Yes, that is correct. Ms. Gonzalez. Critical upgrades." Essential for Everly cut him off, not with a shout, but with a click of the remote. A new document appeared on the screen. It was an invoice. "This is the invoice from the vendor. TechCore Solutions," she said. "Curiously, the registered address for TechCore Solutions is a residential garage in Tacoma. And the sole proprietor of this company is your brother-in-law." The room went deathly silent. Marcus turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. The actual market value of the equipment installed was $75,000. Everly continued, her voice flat. "That leaves a discrepancy of $375,000. Money that was funneled out of this company and into a private account." She looked at Marcus. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of boredom. "You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Mr. Henderson, security is waiting in the hallway to escort you to your vehicle. You will not be returning to your office." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but 2 of the dark-suited lawyers stepped forward. He crumbled. He stood up, his legs shaking, and walked out of the room. A broken man. The door closed behind him with a soft thud. I felt a cold bead of sweat roll down my spine. She was not just firing people. She was dismantling them. She had receipts. She had done the homework. Gary, the CFO, was next. I saw him trembling. He knew he was the gatekeeper. He should have caught Marcus's fraud. "Mr. Thompson," Everly said, turning her gaze to him. "As Chief Financial Officer, your signature is on every one of those checks. I relied on the department heads." Gary stammered. "I cannot micromanage. Every incompetence is as expensive as malice." "Mr. Thompson," Everly interrupted. "You signed off on a 20% budget increase for consulting fees without a single deliverable to show for it. You are also terminated. Please leave." Gary did not argue. He fled. The room was thinning out. The air was getting thinner, harder to breathe. I watched the other executives shrinking in their seats, praying they were invisible. Everly went through 2 more directors. The director of marketing was exposed for inflating ad spend to cover personal travel. The head of IT was caught selling decommissioned hardware for cash. She was methodical. She was surgical. Slice, cut, Remove, then. The room went quiet again. The screen went black for a second. I knew what was coming. I felt it in my gut. A heavy, leaden weight. I was the main event. I was the whale she had been hunting. Everly walked to the head of the table and took a sip of water. She placed the glass down carefully. Then she looked at me. For a brief second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it pity? Sadness? No. It was the look a scientist gives a lab rat before the dissection begins. Now, she said softly, let us discuss the crown jewel of Northridge, the Business Development Division. She clicked the remote. The screen exploded with color. Charts, graphs, numbers. It was my entire career up there. The numbers I had bragged about, the sales figures I had used to justify my bonuses, my car, my ego. Mr. Caldwell has been the golden boy of this company for 3 years, Everly said, addressing the remaining survivors in the room. She spoke about me in the third person, as if I were not sitting right there. His division boasts a 40% year-over-year growth. Impressive. On paper. She clicked again. A spreadsheet appeared. It was dense with data, but certain rows were highlighted in neon yellow. However, Everly said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. When one looks closer at the closed deals, a pattern emerges. Here we have a contract with Apex Logistics for $2 million, signed on the 15th of November. She looked at me. Is that correct? Mr. Caldwell? I cleared my throat. My voice came out as a croak. Yes, that is a valid contract. Is it? She asked. She clicked the remote. An email chain appeared on the screen. Because here's an email from the procurement officer at Apex Logistics dated 2 days ago, stating they never signed a contract. They only signed a letter of intent, a non-binding expression of interest. Yet, you booked the full $2 million as revenue to trigger your quarterly bonus. She let that sink in. That is fraud? Mr. Caldwell, she said simply, booking revenue that does not exist to inflate stock value and secure performance incentives. I felt the blood drain from my face. It is a standard projection model, I argued, trying to find my footing. We count it when the intent is clear. It is industry practice. It is accounting fraud, she corrected, and it is illegal. She did not stop there. She moved on to the expenses. Let us look at the cost of doing business, she said. A new slide. This one was titled Client Acquisition Costs. It listed dinners, hotels, flights. Here we have a dinner at the French Laundry in Napa Valley. She read. Cost, $3,500. Listed as client entertainment with Global Tech. She clicked. I contacted Global Tech. She said. No one from their company was in Napa Valley on that date. However, flight records show that a second ticket was purchased on your company credit card for that same trip. She paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the hard drive in the projector. The passenger on that second ticket was Ms. Ava Moore. I flinched. Beside me, Ava let out a small, strangled sob. Everly turned her eyes to Ava. She did not look jealous. She looked at Ava like she was a line item that had been miscategorized. Ms. Moore. Everly said coolly, your official title is Junior Strategic Liaison. Your salary is $120,000 a year. That is double the market rate for your experience level. A graph appeared showing Ava's salary compared to every other employee in her bracket. Her bar on the graph towered over the others like a skyscraper. Furthermore, Everly continued, relentlessly, in the last 6 months, Mr. Caldwell has approved expense reimbursements for you totaling $45,000. These include office supplies, purchased from luxury boutiques on Fifth Avenue, training materials that appear to be spa treatments, and networking events that coincide perfectly with Mr. Caldwell's business trips. She clicked the remote one more time. The screen filled with a collage of receipts, bags, shoes, jewelry, hotel suites, and right next to them, the company credit card statement signed by me. The visual impact was devastating. It was tacky. It was greedy. It was undeniable. I sat there, stripped naked in front of my peers. The power I had walked in with had evaporated. I wasn't a visionary executive. I was a thief who used company money to impress his mistress. "This is not just embezzlement," Everly said, turning back to the room. "This is a systemic looting of corporate assets. Mr. Caldwell has treated Northridge Systems as his personal piggy bank. He has falsified contracts to boost his ego and his bonus checks. He has created a ghost position for his associate to funnel cash out of the operating budget." She placed the remote down on the table. The click echoed like a gunshot. She looked at me. Finally, I expected her to scream. I expected her to ask why. "Why did you do it? Evan? Why did you betray me?" But she did not ask. She did not care about the why. She only cared about the what. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "you are a liability. Your employment is terminated for cause. Your stock options are voided due to breach of contract, and your severance package is 0. I tried to stand up. I felt a desperate need to regain some control. "You cannot do this," I snarled. Though my voice lacked any real bite. "I built this department. I am the reason this company has any value at all. You need me." Everly looked at me with a mixture of amusement and pity. "I do not need you, Evan," she said. "I bought the company. I own the intellectual property. I own the client list. I own the building we are standing in. The only thing I do not need is the rot." She gestured to the screen, where the evidence of my corruption was still glowing in high definition. "You are not an asset," she said. "You are a case study in failure." She turned to Ava. "And Ms. Moore?" she said. Ava looked up, tears streaming down her face, her makeup ruined. "You are also terminated," Everly said. "However, unlike Mr. Caldwell, I do not believe you were the architect of this scheme. You were merely an expensive accessory." The insult landed effortlessly. Ava gasped. Everly closed her folder. "This concludes the audit presentation," she said to the room. "Security will now collect your badges and company devices." She sat down in the CEO's chair, leaning back, looking perfectly at ease. She did not look like a woman who had just destroyed her husband's life. She looked like a CEO who had just finished a difficult but necessary meeting. I stood there, swaying slightly. The humiliation was total. I had brought Ava here to flaunt my victory. Instead, Everly had used us as a slide deck to demonstrate her power. I looked at the screen one last time. My name, my crimes, my shame. Everly picked up her gold pen, the one I had given her, and made a note on her paper. She did not look up as the security guards stepped forward. Their hands reaching for my arm, the dissection was over, the patient was dead, and the surgeon was already moving on to the next case. I waited for the command. I braced myself for the humiliation of the frog march, that inevitable, pitiful walk where security guards grip your biceps and escort you to the elevator while the receptionist pretends to type. I was ready for it. In fact, I wanted it. I wanted to get out of that room. I wanted to get into my car, drive to the coast, and figure out how to spin this disaster into a sabbatical on my LinkedIn profile. I was already calculating the exit strategy. I would tell headhunters I had a philosophical difference with the new ownership. I would say I outgrew the role. I was ready to run. But the command never came. Everly sat in the high-backed leather chair, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the file that contained my life's destruction. She looked at the security guards who were hovering over me. "Wait," she said. Her voice was soft, but it stopped the room cold. She turned to Sterling, her lawyer. "If we terminate Mr. Caldwell and Mrs. Moore today, what happens?" she asked, as if posing a theoretical question in a law school seminar. Sterling adjusted his cuffs. "Well, Ms. Gonzalez, we would file immediate civil suits for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud to recover the misappropriated assets. However, given the complexity of the forensic accounting required to prove the exact extent of the damages, the legal process could take 2 or 3 years. In the meantime, they would be free to seek employment elsewhere, albeit with a tarnished record." Everly nodded slowly. She looked at me. It was a look devoid of anger. It was the look a biologist gives a specimen in a jar. 2 or 3 years, she repeated, and in that time, he walks away. He plays the victim. He tells the world he was pushed out by a hostile takeover. He keeps his narrative. She closed the folder. No, she said firmly, that is too easy. That is a mercy he has not earned. She stood up and walked around the table until she was standing right in front of me. I could smell her perfume, a scent I had not noticed in years. It smelled like rain and expensive soap. It smelled like authority. "Evan," she said, looking down at me as I sat slumped in my chair. "I am not going to fire you. Not yet." I looked up, confused. Hope, stupid and desperate, flared in my chest. Was she giving me a second chance? Was there a part of her that still loved me? Was this all just a power play to scare me straight? "You are keeping me on?" I stammered. "Evie, I promise. I can fix the numbers. I can make it back. I know this business better than anyone." She smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a terrifying, razor-thin curvature of her lips. "Oh, you are going to fix the numbers. Evan, but not as vice president." She turned to Sterling. "Draft the addendum to his contract." Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a document that had already been prepared. He slid it across the table toward me. "Effective immediately," Sterling said, his voice dry. "Your title of vice president is revoked. Your salary is adjusted to the state minimum wage for an entry-level administrative assistant. You will forfeit all bonuses, stock options, and commission structures." I stared at the paper. Minimum wage? That wouldn't even cover the gas for my commute. "And," Sterling continued, "you are reassigned to the Internal Audit Support Division." I frowned. "We don't have an Internal Audit Support Division." "We do now," Everly said. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I and Ava could hear. "You created this mess. Evan, you are going to clean it up. Your job, for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, is to audit yourself." She pointed to the screen where the graph of my fraud was still projected. "Every expense report you falsified, every client dinner that never happened, every inflated contract. You are going to go through the archives. You are going to find the original receipts. You are going to write a detailed report explaining exactly how you stole the money, where it went, and who authorized it. You are going to build the case for the prosecution, piece by piece." I felt sick. She wanted me to write my own confession. She wanted me to spend my days reliving every lie, documenting every instance of my own greed. "And if I refuse?" I asked, trying to sound defiant. "If I walk out right now?" "Then I hand this file to the Federal Bureau of Investigation this afternoon," she said calmly. "And you leave this building in handcuffs." She let the threat hang there. It wasn't a bluff. I knew it wasn't a bluff. Everly didn't bluff anymore. "So, here is the deal," she said. "You stay, you work, you pay back what you stole through labor and restitution, you help us recover the assets, and maybe, if you are very cooperative, we keep this a civil matter instead of a criminal one." I looked at the contract. I looked at the door. I looked at the terrifying calmness of my wife. I realized I was trapped. If I ran, I went to prison. If I stayed, I went to hell. "I will sign." I whispered. "Good," she said. "Now, give me your keys." My keys?" "The Aston Martin," she said. "The lease is in the company's name. It is an executive perk. You are no longer an executive." My hand shook as I reached into my pocket. That car was my armor. It was the physical manifestation of my success. I loved that car more than I loved most people. The heavy metal fob felt warm in my hand. I placed it on the table. Everly picked it up and dropped it into her pocket. "And the access card," she added, "the platinum pass." I pulled the black card from my wallet. This card gave me access to the executive elevator, the private gym, the boardroom, the VIP lounge. It was my key to the kingdom. She took it and handed it to a security guard. "Issue him a standard gray badge," she ordered. "Restricted access, ground floor, basement, and the audit room only. No gym, no lounge. And he uses the service elevator. We do not want him clogging up the client lobby." She turned her attention to Ava. Ava had stopped crying. She was sitting very still, looking at me with a mixture of horror and hatred. She realized that the man she thought was a king was actually a serf, and Ms. Moore. Everly said. Ava jumped. "I will resign." Ava whispered, "I will go. I do not want any trouble. You are not going anywhere either." Everly said pleasantly, "You were a willing participant in the misappropriation of funds. You accepted gifts, travel, and salary that you knew were fraudulent." Ava shook her head frantically. "Evan told me it was okay. He said it was part of the budget, and you believed him because it was convenient." Everly countered, "Ignorance is not a defense when you are wearing a $3,000 bracelet purchased with company funds." Everly gestured to the paperwork. "You have a choice. Ava, we can sue you for the full amount of the theft, which totals roughly $85,000. Or you can accept a transfer." "A transfer?" Ava asked, her voice trembling. "To the Records and Archival Department." Everly said, "We need someone to physically retrieve the boxes of old files from the basement storage. So Mr. Caldwell can audit them. It is dusty work. It pays minimum wage, but it will keep you out of court." Ava looked at me. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was 24. She had her whole life ahead of her. A lawsuit would bankrupt her. A criminal record would destroy her. "I will take the job." Ava whispered. "Excellent," Everly said. She clapped her hands together once, a sharp sound of finality. "One last thing," she said. "Since you two work so well together, since you are such a dynamic duo, I have arranged for you to share an office." She smiled again. "Room 402. It is the old server supply closet near the break room. It has glass walls. I thought you would appreciate the visibility. After all, Evan, you always liked being the center of attention." 10 minutes later, I was walking down the hallway, but I wasn't walking with my head high. I was walking behind a security guard who was carrying a cardboard box containing the few personal items I was allowed to keep from my penthouse office. I passed the sales floor. The news had already traveled. I could feel it. The silence rippled outward as I passed. People stopped typing. They looked up over their monitors. I saw the junior associates I had yelled at last week. I saw the secretaries I had ignored. I saw the competitors I had crushed. They didn't look angry. They looked embarrassed. They looked at me with that cringe-inducing pity you feel when you see a drunk person stumble in the street. They averted their eyes. They pretended to be busy. I was a ghost. I was a walking dead man. The guard led us to room 402. It was exactly as Everly had described. It was a fishbowl, a small, glass-walled room right in the middle of the busiest corridor in the building. It had previously been used to store toner cartridges and spare cables. It had no windows to the outside, only glass walls facing the office. Inside, there were two small, metal desks shoved against each other. They were old, scratched, and wobbly. The chairs were the cheap, plastic kind that hurt your back after an hour. "Here you go," the guard said. Dumping my box on one of the desks, "The restroom is down the hall. Second door on the left. You have a 30-minute lunch break at noon. Do not be late." He walked away. I stood there, staring at the cramped space. It was a cage, a literal glass cage. Ava walked in behind me. She was carrying a stack of files. She was still wearing her expensive crimson dress, but now it looked ridiculous. It looked like a costume. She dropped the files on her desk with a loud thwack. "This is your fault," she hissed. I turned to look at her. The beautiful, adoring girl from the morning was gone. Her face was twisted in a snarl. "My fault?" I snapped back. "You enjoyed the trips just as much as I did." "Ava, you didn't complain when I bought you that necklace. I hate you," she said, her voice shaking with venom. "You are a liar and a loser. You told me you ran this place. You told me she was nothing." "She is nothing," I shouted, my voice cracking. "She just got lucky. She has a lawyer." Ava laughed. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound. "She is the CEO. Evan, she owns you. Look at us. We are in a closet." She sat down and buried her face in her hands. I sat down at my desk. My knees bumped against hers. There was no legroom. There was no escape. I looked out through the glass wall. I could see the main floor. I could see people walking by, glancing in, and then quickly looking away. I was on display. I was the exhibit at the zoo. The fallen executive. A shadow fell over the glass. I looked up. Everly was standing on the mezzanine level, looking down at the office floor. She was looking right at our glass box. She held a cup of coffee in her hand. She took a sip, watching us. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just watched. She had put us in a jar. She had screwed the lid on tight. And now, she was just going to wait and watch us suffocate. I reached for the first file on the stack. It was marked Fiscal Year 2023. I opened it. The first receipt was for a dinner at a steakhouse. $400. I remembered that night. I had taken Ava there to celebrate her first month. I had expensed it as strategic planning. I uncapped my cheap plastic pen. Item 1. I wrote on the audit form. Personal expense mischaracterized as business development. Beneficiary, Evan Caldwell and Ava Moore. My hand shook. I was writing my own obituary. Ava was sobbing quietly across from me, the sound grating on my nerves. I looked at her, and I felt nothing but revulsion. She was a reminder of my stupidity, and I knew she felt the same way about me. Every day, for the foreseeable future, I would have to sit 3 feet away from the woman who symbolized my destruction. I would have to smell her perfume, hear her breathing, and feel her hatred. Everly was right. Firing me would have been a mercy. This was hell, and the worst part was, I had built it myself, brick by brick, lie by lie. Now, I just had to live in it. Time ceased to be measured in fiscal quarters or profit margins. It began to be measured in the painfully slow, rhythmic ticking of the plastic wall clock inside room 402. 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, 8 hours of suffocating proximity to the wreckage of my own life. It had been 90 days since the board meeting. 3 months to the outside world. The seasons were changing. The rain in Seattle was turning into the soft, gray warmth of early summer. But inside the glass fishbowl, the climate was a perpetual, freezing winter. I sat at my metal desk, the surface cold against my forearms. My bespoke suits were hanging in a plastic bag at the back of my closet at home. Collecting dust, Everly had implemented a new dress code for the audit support staff. Gray polo shirts and black slacks. Uniforms. I looked like a janitor. I felt like a convict. Across from me, 3 feet away, sat Ava. The first week, we had screamed at each other. The second week, we had cried. Now, we existed in a state of venomous silence. The romance was dead, rotted away by the harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. Ava had stopped wearing makeup. Her red hair, once blown out to perfection, was pulled back in a severe, oily ponytail. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. The glamour I had projected onto her, the idea that she was a goddess of the new age, had evaporated. Without the expensive dinners and the thrill of the secret affair, she was just a 24-year-old girl who realized she had bet on a horse with a broken leg. She kicked my shin under the table. It was a sharp, vicious jab with the toe of her sneaker. "Move your leg," she hissed, not looking up from the stack of files she was organizing. "You are encroaching on my space." I pulled my leg back, gritting my teeth. "It is a 5-foot room." "Ava, there is no space. You promised me a penthouse," she muttered, slamming a file box onto the desk. "You promised me a view. Now the only view I have is the vending machine and your miserable face." I ignored her. I had to ignore her. If I engaged, I would lose my mind. I looked down at the document in front of me. It was a credit card statement from 2 years ago. I had highlighted line item 42. Purchase, diamond stud earrings. Vendor, Tiffany & Company. Amount, $2,400. Justification, client appreciation gift for female. CEO of logistics partner. I remembered buying them. I remembered giving them to Ava in the elevator. I remembered the way she had kissed my neck. Now, I picked up my pen. My hand cramped. I had been writing for 6 hours straight. Entry 412. I wrote on the confession log. Item marked as client gift was personal purchase for Ms. Moore. No client received this item. Expense is fraudulent. I felt a piece of my soul chip away with every word. Everly was not just making me pay the money back. She was making me curate the museum of my own stupidity. She was forcing me to look at the price tag of my ego. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, the ritual took place. I had to take the service elevator up to the 42nd floor. I was not allowed to use the main lifts. I had to ride up with the catering carts and the trash bins. The smell of rotting lunch leftovers became the scent of my commute. I would walk to the executive suite, clutching my daily report. The new receptionist, a young man who looked at me with a mix of fear and curiosity, would buzz me in. Go right in. Mr. Caldwell, she's expecting you. Everly's office, my old office's neighbor, but now expanded into a massive suite, was a sanctuary of calm. It smelled of fresh lilies and success. I walked in yesterday, just like I did every day. Everly was standing by the window, looking out at the city I used to think I owned. She was on the phone. The projected yield is up 15%. She was saying, yes, the restructuring of the business development unit removed significant dead weight. Efficiency is at an all-time high. She turned and saw me. She did not hang up. She just gestured for me to wait. We have reallocated the budget from the, let us call it, the entertainment fund into R&D. She continued, the shareholders are very pleased. Excellent. I will speak to you next week. She ended the call and placed her phone on the desk. She looked radiant. She wore colors now. Deep blues, emerald greens. She looked like a woman who had shed a heavy skin. Report, she said simply. I walked forward and placed the stack of papers on her desk. I finished the audit of the second quarter of 2023. I said, my voice monotonous. I identified $12,000 in unauthorized travel expenses and $4,000 in falsified client dinners. She put on her glasses and picked up the top sheet. She scanned it. She was looking for errors. If I missed a single cent, she would make me redo the entire month. You missed the parking fee on June 4th, she said, tapping the paper with her fingernail. $75 at the airport. You claimed it was for a conference. There was no conference that week. I sighed. I will add it. Do that, she said. And Evan? I looked up. Your handwriting is getting sloppy. Legibility is important for legal records. Rewrite page 4. I felt the anger bubbling up, hot and corrosive. It was petty. It was torture. Why are you doing this? I asked. My voice tight. Just fire me. Evie, send me to jail. Anything is better than this. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. Jail is a room with bars. Evan, you would sit there and blame the system. You would blame the judge. You would blame me. You would never actually look at what you did. She leaned forward. Here, you have to look. You have to write it down. You have to verify it. By the time you are done, you will not have any excuses left. You will know exactly who ruined your life. She pushed the papers back toward me. Rewrite page 4. And do not be late for your shift tomorrow. We are auditing the marketing budget. I took the papers and walked out. I took the service elevator down. I walked past the break room where the other employees were laughing and drinking coffee. They went silent when they saw me. They parted like the Red Sea, giving me a wide berth. I heard the whispers. That is him, the one who stole from his wife. I heard he has to pay back every cent. Pathetic. I walked back into the glass box. Ava was staring at the ceiling, spinning a pen. She sent you back? She asked, smirking. Rewrite page 4. I muttered, sitting down. She laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. You know she is never going to let us go, right? We are her pets, her little hamsters in a cage. I am leaving. I said suddenly. The words just tumbled out. Ava stopped spinning the pen. What? I am leaving. Tonight, I cannot do this anymore. I am going to walk out the front door and never come back. You have a contract. Ava pointed out. Contracts can be broken. I said. I grabbed my phone. A cheap, company-issued model with restricted data. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It was David Thorne, a VP at a rival logistics firm. We used to drink scotch together. We used to trade war stories. He owed me a favor. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Hello? David's voice. David, it is Evan, I said, keeping my voice low so the people outside the glass could not hear. Evan Caldwell. There was a long pause on the other end. Evan, David said. His tone was not friendly. It was cautious. Why are you calling me on this line? I need a lifeboat. David, I said, desperation creeping in. I am done at Northridge. It is a toxic environment. I need a soft landing. I can bring you the client list. I can bring you the strategies. I just need a position. Consultant. Anything. David laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous laugh. Evan, are you serious? Do you have any idea what the word on the street is? What word? I asked. Everly Gonzalez. He said, she sent a dossier to every major firm in the sector. It wasn't a blacklist. It was worse. It was a transparency report. She released the audit findings on your performance, the inflated numbers, the fake contracts, the embezzlement. I felt the blood drain from my face. She released the numbers? Everyone has seen it. Evan, David said, you are radioactive. If I hired you, my board would fire me for negligence. You are not just unhireable. You are a liability. Nobody is going to touch you, but I have experience. I pleaded. I brought in millions. You brought in smoke, David corrected. And now the smoke has cleared. Do not call me again. Evan. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. I looked at Ava. She was watching me with a look of grim satisfaction. They know? She asked. They know everything. I whispered. I looked out at the office floor, the bustling, productive, profitable office floor. The monitors were glowing with positive numbers. The sales team was ringing the victory bell, a tradition I had started, but now they were ringing it for deals I had nothing to do with. Everly had not just defeated me, she had erased me. She had taken my reputation, my future, and my pride, and she had fed them into a shredder. I looked down at page 4 of my report. Parking fee, $75. I picked up my pen. I started to rewrite. The collapse was not a sudden explosion. It was this. It was the slow, grinding realization that the world had moved on without me. I was not a titan of industry. I was a clerk. I was a clerk with a debt I could never repay. Sitting in a glass box, writing lines like a naughty schoolboy, I looked at the company newsletter that had been left on the corner of my desk by the cleaning crew. The headline read, Northridge Systems posts record Q, 3 profits under new leadership. There was a picture of Everly. She was standing at a podium, looking strong, capable, and visionary. The caption read, CEO. Everly Gonzalez attributes success to cleaning out the system and focusing on integrity. I was the dirt. I was the grime she had scrubbed away so the real structure could shine. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sorrow. It was a tear of pure, distilled impotence. Ava saw it. You are crying. She mocked softly. The great Evan Caldwell is crying over a parking receipt. Shut up, Ava, I whispered. She leaned across the desk, her eyes cold. You know what the worst part is? She asked. I did not answer. The worst part is that she is doing a better job than you ever did. Ava said, and she is doing it without cheating. I squeezed the pen so hard the plastic barrel cracked. Ink leaked onto my fingers, staining them blue. It looked like a bruise that would never heal. I looked at the ink. I looked at the glass walls. I looked at the clock. 4:32 in the afternoon. Only 2 years. 364 days left to go. I went back to writing. The punishment was not the work. The punishment was the knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged, and the woman I had underestimated, she was exactly where she belonged. On top of the world, on top of me, crushing me, slowly, with the weight of my own sins. The ink on the final page of the audit report was still wet when I capped my pen. It was a Friday afternoon. 4 months into my sentence in the glass box, outside, the Seattle sky was a heavy slate gray, threatening a storm that never seemed to break. Inside room 402, the air was stale, recycled, and thick with the tension that had become my constant companion. I looked at the stack of papers in front of me. It was a mountain, 4,000 pages of confessions. I had documented every cent I had stolen, every contract I had forged, and every extravagant dinner I had expensed. I had organized it, categorized it, and cross-referenced it with bank statements. I had done a better job auditing my own crimes than any external firm could have ever done. I felt a strange, delusional sense of accomplishment. I had done what Everly asked. I had swallowed my pride. I had played the good soldier. Surely, this was the end of it. The civil matter she had promised to keep between us was now resolved. I would present this to her. We would work out a repayment plan, and I would finally be allowed to leave this purgatory. I would go work for a small logistics firm in Idaho or Montana, somewhere where nobody knew the name Evan Caldwell. I looked at Ava. She was staring at her computer screen, her face pale and drawn. She had stopped fighting me weeks ago. Now, she just existed. "It is done," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. "The master file is complete." Ava did not look up. She just nodded, a small, jerky motion. "Good for you." "Evan," I stood up, stretching my back. My joints popped. I felt like an old man. I gathered the files into a heavy cardboard box. It weighed about 20 pounds. The weight of my sins. I am taking it up. I said, "This ends today." I walked out of the glass box, carrying the box with a sense of grim purpose. I took the service elevator up to the 42nd floor. The ride was slow, the mechanical whirring of the cables sounding like a dirge. When the doors opened, the executive lobby was quiet, too quiet. Usually, the receptionist was there, typing away. Today, the desk was empty. I walked toward the double doors of the CEO's suite. They were already open. I stepped inside, expecting to see Everly behind her desk, perhaps waiting to offer me a curt nod of dismissal, but Everly was not sitting. She was standing by the window, her back to me, and she was not alone. Standing around the room were 4 men. They were not the corporate lawyers I had become accustomed to. These men wore windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. They had badges clipped to their belts. They had the hard, cynical eyes of men who had seen every type of white-collar criminal try to lie their way out of a corner. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, the box of files heavy in my arms. Everly turned around slowly. She held a single piece of paper in her hand. It was the cover sheet I had signed just an hour ago. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was final. "You have completed the assignment." I looked at the men. I looked at her. "Evie," I whispered. "Who are these people?" Everly did not answer me. She turned to the man closest to her, a tall agent with graying hair. "Agent Miller," she said, handing him the paper. "This is the signed confession and the complete forensic audit of the embezzlement scheme at Northridge Systems. As you can see, the perpetrator has personally verified every instance of fraud. He has authenticated the bank transfers and admitted to the forgery of the vendor contracts." She pointed a manicured finger at the box in my arms. "And that box contains the supporting evidence, organized chronologically, as per your request." I dropped the box. It hit the floor with a thunderous crash, papers spilling out across the plush carpet. "You lied to me." I choked out. "You said if I did the work, we would keep it civil. You said I could work it off." Everly walked toward me. She stopped 3 feet away, just out of reach. She looked at me with the same clinical detachment she had used in the boardroom. "I said that if you were cooperative, we might keep it civil," she corrected. But then I looked at the numbers. "Evan, I looked at the extent of what you did. You did not just steal money. You stole the retirement funds of the support staff. You inflated the stock price so artificially that when we corrected it, 3 pension funds lost value. Her eyes hardened. Civil court is for mistakes. Evan, prison is for predators. Agent Miller stepped forward. He pulled a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratchet clicking open was the loudest thing in the world. Evan Caldwell, you are under arrest for securities fraud, grand larceny, and wire fraud. He recited. I stumbled back, my hands held up in a pathetic gesture of defense. No, you cannot do this. I wrote the report. I helped you. You built the gallows. Evan, Everly said softly, I just pulled the lever. The agent grabbed my wrist. The cold metal bit into my skin. He spun me around, forcing my arms behind my back. The click of the cuffs locking was absolute. It was the sound of a door slamming shut that would never open again. Take him down through the main lobby. Everly instructed the agents. The press is waiting. I struggled as they marched me out. The press? She had called the press? They dragged me into the elevator. The main executive elevator this time. The ride down was a blur of terror. I tried to think of a defense. I tried to think of a lie. But I had nothing. I had just spent 4 months writing down the truth. The doors opened to the lobby. The flashbulbs blinded me instantly. It was a wall of white light. I blinked, tears streaming down my face, trying to see. There were dozens of them, reporters, cameras, and behind them, the employees of Northridge. They were not working. They were standing in the atrium, watching. Hundreds of them, the people whose pensions I had damaged, the people whose bonuses I had stolen. They were silent. They did not boo. They did not jeer. They just watched with a heavy, judgmental collective stare. It was worse than screaming. It was the gaze of a society rejecting a parasite. I was shoved through the glass doors and into the back of a waiting federal car. I saw my reflection in the window as the door closed. I looked small. I looked terrified. I looked guilty. The legal process moved with the speed of a guillotine. Everly did not sue me. The United States government sued me, and their star witness was the files I had written. My lawyer, a court-appointed defender because my assets had been frozen within an hour of my arrest, looked at the evidence and laughed. It was a sad, hopeless laugh. You signed everything, Mr. Caldwell, he said, tossing the file onto the metal table of the interrogation room. You initialed every page. There is no defense here. You literally prosecuted yourself. Who convinced you to do this? My wife, I whispered. Your wife is a genius, he said, and you are going away for a very long time. But the final knife had not yet been twisted. That happened during the deposition phase. I was sitting in the holding cell, waiting for my lawyer to negotiate a plea deal. He walked in, looking grim. The prosecution has added a witness to the list. He said, they are offering her immunity in exchange for testimony regarding your coercive control. Immunity? I asked. Who? The door opened. Ava walked in. She was not wearing the gray uniform anymore. She was wearing a modest blue suit. She looked young. She looked innocent. She looked like a victim. She sat down across from me, flanked by her own lawyer. She did not look at me. She looked at the table. Ava? I said. Ava, tell them we were in this together. Tell them it was a partnership. Ava looked up. Her eyes were wet with tears. Fake tears. I knew her face. I knew when she was acting, and she was giving the performance of her life. I was afraid of him, she said to the recorder, her voice trembling. He was the vice president. He told me that if I did not sign the expenses, he would fire me. He told me that if I did not go on the trips, he would destroy my career. She looked at me then, a quick, sharp glance. He used me, she said. I was just 23. I did not know any better. He groomed me. He made me believe that this was how business worked. I am just a victim of his greed. I slammed my hands on the table, the chains rattling. You liar, I screamed. You love the diamonds. You picked out the hotels. You begged me to take you to Paris. Ava flinched, shrinking back into her chair. See, she sobbed. See how violent he is? My lawyer put a hand on my shoulder, forcing me down. Shut up, Evan. You are digging the hole deeper. I looked at Ava. I saw the faint ghost of a smile on her lips. She had learned. She had learned from me, and she had learned from Everly. She realized that the ship was going down, and she had found the only life raft left, blaming the captain. She was going to walk. She would get a slap on the wrist, maybe probation. She would play the naive girl who was manipulated by the powerful, corrupt executive. The narrative was perfect. The jury would eat it up, and I would take the fall for both of us. The day of the sentencing arrived 3 months later. The courtroom was packed. The media was there. The shareholders were there. But Everly was not there. I scanned the gallery, looking for her white suit, looking for her calm face. I wanted her to see me. I wanted to look her in the eye one last time. I wanted to see if she felt any guilt for destroying the man she had married. But the seat reserved for the victim, Northridge Systems, was occupied by Sterling, the lawyer. She did not come. My lawyer whispered to me. She sent a statement. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. She did not even care enough to watch me die. I was not worth her time. I was just a line item she had already crossed out. The judge was an older woman with a face like carved flint. She read the verdict, guilty on all counts. She looked at me over her glasses. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case of such arrogant entitlement. You plundered a company that trusted you. You betrayed a wife who supported you. And you corrupted a young employee for your own vanity." She paused. "But what strikes me most is your attempt to hide your crimes. Or rather, your failure to do so." The evidence provided by Ms. Gonzalez is the most comprehensive documentation of corporate malfeasance I have ever seen. You have saved the taxpayers millions of dollars in investigation costs by documenting your own theft. She shuffled her papers. "Therefore, while I am sentencing you to the maximum term allowed by law, I am also noting that your cooperation, however involuntary it may have been, was absolute." She banged the gavel. 15 years in federal prison, restitution of $4.2 million, and a lifetime ban from holding any executive position in a publicly traded company. 15 years. I would be 50 years old when I got out. I would have nothing, no money, no career, no name. Sterling stood up. He walked over to the defense table. He did not offer to shake my hand. He simply placed a small envelope on the table in front of me. "Ms. Gonzalez asked me to give you this," he said. He turned and walked away. I picked up the envelope with trembling hands. The bailiff was already moving toward me, keys jingling, ready to take me to the transport van. I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of the two of us, taken 10 years ago on our honeymoon. We were standing on a beach, looking young and happy. I had my arm around her. She was looking at me with total adoration. On the back of the photo, in her elegant, sharp handwriting, she had written 5 words. "I love the man in this picture. You killed him long before I did." I stared at the photo. I stared at the boy I used to be. The boy who had ambition but no greed. The boy who had a wife who would have walked through fire for him. I realized then that the punishment was not the prison cell. The punishment was not the bankruptcy. The punishment was knowing that I had held the winning lottery ticket in my hand. A life of love, stability, and genuine success. And I had set it on fire just to warm my hands for a few minutes. I looked up at the bailiff. "I am ready," I said, but I wasn't. I would never be ready for the silence that was coming, the silence of a life that had been erased. Everly had not just taken her revenge, she had taken my history. The door to the holding cell clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in 100 years, the story was over. The villain had lost, and the hero was somewhere else, living a life that I was no longer a part of, not even as a memory. The prison library is the only place where the air does not smell like industrial disinfectant and despair. It smells of old paper and dust. I spend most of my allotted recreational time here. It is ironic. I used to sign contracts worth $10 million without reading the fine print. Now, I read every single word of the business journals that are donated to the facility, desperate for a glimpse of the world I used to rule. Yesterday, I found it. It was a copy of Forbes, dog-eared and stained with coffee, dated 2 months ago. I almost missed it. I was flipping through the pages, looking for familiar names, looking for the ghosts of my past life, and then I saw her. She was not on the cover. Everly does not do covers. Covers are for people who need attention. Covers are for people like the old Evan Caldwell. Everly was on page 42, in the Innovators section. The photo was small, understated. She was wearing a simple black blazer, standing in a garden. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at something off-frame, something in the distance that only she could see. The headline read, "The Quiet Revolution: How One Woman Turned a Toxic Asset into a Gold Mine." I read the article 3 times. My hands shook so hard that the paper rattled. Northridge Systems is dead. The name has been scraped off the building. The logo has been removed from the letterhead. The company I spent 10 years building, the company I looted, the company I thought was my personal playground, it does not exist anymore. Everly rebranded it. It is now called Aegis Solutions. Aegis, the shield of Zeus, the symbol of protection. The article detailed the restructuring. It described how the new CEO, Everly Gonzalez, had dismantled the boys' club culture of the sales department. She had fired 70% of the upper management. My friends, my enablers, the men who laughed at my jokes and drank my wine. She had replaced them with algorithms and a new team of young, hungry, ethical operators who viewed an expense account as a tool, not a right. There was a quote from an industry analyst in the 3rd paragraph. "The turnaround at Aegis is nothing short of miraculous." The analyst said, "The previous leadership operated with a level of inefficiency and corruption that borders on the absurd. They were playing house with shareholder money. Ms. Gonzalez came in and simply turned on the lights. The roaches scattered. The roaches. That is what I am now. A roach that got stepped on. I looked for my name in the article. I wanted to see it. I needed to know that I had left a mark, even if it was a scar. I scanned every column inch. I found it in the very last sentence. Following the conviction of former Vice President Evan Caldwell for large-scale embezzlement. The company has implemented the Caldwell Protocol, a strict automated auditing system that prevents any single executive from authorizing expenses over $500 without triple-blind verification. That is my legacy. I am not a legend. I am not a visionary. I am a cautionary tale. I am the name of a security patch. I am the error code in the system. I closed the magazine and stared at the gray wall of the library. I thought about Ava. I had heard about her through the grapevine. Prison is a small world, and information travels faster than light. A new inmate had arrived last week, a guy who used to work in the mailroom at a competitor's firm. He knew who I was. He took great pleasure in telling me the news during lunch. Ava did not go to prison. Her victim act worked. The jury gave her 3 years of probation and community service. But the industry, the high-flying corporate world of Seattle, is a village. Everyone talks, and nobody hires a snitch who slept her way to the middle. She left the city. The last anyone heard, she was working as a shift supervisor at a discount clothing retailer in a strip mall in Tacoma. She is 25 years old, and her career is over. The red dress is gone. The diamonds were seized by the feds. The future I promised her, the penthouses, the travel, the power, it all evaporated. She is likely standing behind a register right now, scanning items for minimum wage, wondering how she went from sitting in a boardroom to folding t-shirts. She hates me, I am sure, but her hate does not matter anymore. We are both just debris left in Everly's wake. And Everly? The article said she steps down from the day-to-day operations at 5 o'clock every evening. She does not work weekends. She does not take late-night client dinners. She has appointed a board of directors to handle the noise. She bought a house on the coast, a quiet place, not a mansion, just a home. She won, but she did not win the way I would have tried to win. If the roles were reversed, if she had betrayed me, I would have waged a loud, bloody war. I would have screamed in court. I would have given interviews. I would have tried to destroy her reputation with noise and fury. Everly did none of that. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not even show up to watch me get sentenced. She treated my destruction as a business transaction. I was a liability. She liquidated me. She recovered the assets. She balanced the books. And then she moved on. That is the part that keeps me awake at night in my cell. It is not the guilt. It is not the fear of the other inmates. It is the realization of how insignificant I was to her in the end. I thought I was the main character in her life. I thought my betrayal would break her. I thought my affair would shatter her world. But I was just a bad investment. And she is a brilliant investor. She cut her losses. I remember the last time I saw her, really saw her, before the boardroom doors opened. It was that morning in the kitchen. She was wearing that gray cardigan. I told her to go to the spa. I told her to stop pinching pennies. I thought she was weak. I thought her silence was submission. I thought her lack of interest in my glamorous life was because she was boring. I was so wrong. She was not boring. She was busy. She was not submissive. She was patient. She was watching me build a tower of cards. And she was quietly holding the wind. The guard calls out. Recreational time is over. I stand up. I smooth down the front of my orange jumpsuit. It is a far cry from the Italian wool suits I used to wear. I pick up the magazine to put it back on the rack. I look at her picture one last time. She looks peaceful. That is the ultimate revenge, isn't it? She is happy. She is successful, and she does not think about me at all. I walk back to my cell. The bars slide shut with a heavy, metallic clang. Clang. It sounds just like the closing of a ledger. I sit on my cot and look at the small square of sky visible through the high window. It is raining. I used to think I was the sun. I used to think Everly was just a shadow that existed because I cast it. I thought she needed me to define her outline, but I was the fool. Shadows are not empty. Shadows are where the secrets are kept. Shadows are where the ambush is planned. And while I was busy staring at my own reflection, loving the light, she was in the dark, sharpening the knife. The lesson is simple, though it cost me my entire life to learn it. Never mistake a woman's silence for ignorance. Never mistake her calm for weakness. And never, ever assume that just because she is standing behind you, she is backing you up. She might just be waiting for the perfect angle to push you off the ledge. I lie back on the pillow. It is thin and smells of mildew. Evan Caldwell is gone. He died in that boardroom. The man in this cell is just a receipt, a proof of purchase, a record of a transaction where I sold my soul for a little bit of applause, and my wife bought it back for pennies on the dollar. The game is over. The board is clear, and the woman who bought the boardroom has turned off the lights. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed this journey through ambition, betrayal, and cold justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below telling me which country or city you are listening in. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button for the Leona Revenge Stories channel. Smash the like button and press the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep bringing you these dramatic tales. See you in the next story.